The Big Bang Theory goes out of its way to tell us that Sheldon is neurodivergent, but that also means that he has no filter because to the writers, being neurodivergent and having no filter are the same things. We are given hints that because of his upbringing, Michael is the way he is, but at the end of the day, he just has a big personality and is racist and sexist. Like, is it that hard to believe that a man with power is sexist and racist? Like, come on. So if you're from the US, you've probably watched The Office. Hey everyone, my name's Cheyenne and I'm an Asian American adoptee and expat living in Brazil. I post new videos about race, feminism, and pop culture every Tuesday and Friday, so if you're into that, please subscribe and ring the bell. The Office, which had 9 seasons airing from 2004 to 2013, was a cultural TV touchstone in the US. It's most remembered for its absurdist humor, wild cast of characters, and mockumentary setup. Though The Office is based off a British TV show of the same name, I won't be mentioning it here because I haven't seen it and honestly don't really want to. But the American Office was huge for a while, at least until it started going downhill around season 5. And a lot of jokes from The Office still live on in reaction GIFs today. Most notably, That's What She Said, Did I Stutter, and We Need a New Plague, which doesn't really hold up that well today. And though The Office doesn't hold up too well, especially considering we have a Michael Scott in the White House.
There are those that say, you can test too much. You do know that.
Who says that?
Oh, just read the manuals, read the books.
Manual?
Happy New Year, Daryl!
The show still does look nice. Compared to other contemporary shows of its time, like Psych, Monk, and House, it just seems to look better, the camera quality is better, and also the fashion choices seem less dated. So because The Office seems so important and still looks so nice, I decided to watch all of it in a matter of a month and report to you all what was so intriguing about it and how it inspired other shows like The Big Bang Theory and Superstore. And one more fun fact before I go on is that McCain, who ran against Obama in 2008, wanted Dwight to be his running mate, and Rainn Wilson agreed. And if you don't remember, Dwight took Latino laborers from Scranton to his farm and then fake called INS on them so he wouldn't have to pay them and that they would run away. So number 1, race and diversity. So one of the first episodes of The Office is Diversity Day, and we all know the shtick. Michael is racist and only sees the people of color in his office as caricatures. He sees Kelly as the exotic convenience store owner, Stanley as from the hood, and Oscar as Speedy Gonzalez. And Mr. Brown, yes, that is his real name, Michael, comes in to try to teach diversity to Michael and racial tolerance, but of course Michael hates Mr. Brown and ends up making him leave and teaches diversity in his own way. He basically just wants people to be as openly racist as possible, just like he is, to tear down the facade of polite society. And of course it results in very awkward and offensive humor. Most of The Office humor relies on everyone being in on the joke. We know Michael is racist and bad, so when he acts absurdly racist in public, we think it's funny because even though we might be as racist as he is, at least we don't act like that, or at least we don't think we do. Another reason why it's funny is because we're laughing at Michael rather than with him. Everyone in The Office hates Michael, but especially the people of color. So as a person of color watching this white guy make a fool out of himself, it is kind of funny. And we even get some catharsis when Kelly slaps him in the face. But unfortunately, Michael never learns his lesson. He continues to call Stanley urban and sassy, and thinks that Daryl is a baby daddy just because he's black, and he also later makes fun of Daryl for not being good at rapping. He's rude to Idris Elba's character and also to Hank, the black security guard, and he continues to make Oscar's life a living hell. Whenever there was a new person of color on set, I held my breath and looked away because I was just so sick of Michael's blatant racism. And because he never learns his lesson or changes, the people of color on set hate him and want nothing to do with him. And as a consequence, they're just not in the show very much. Michael is the main character of the show, and the only people who can stand to be around him are the thin, straight white people, much like a real Office dynamic. And that's sad to me because it seems as though The Office was trying to have this class commentary and include black characters, other characters of color, gay characters, and fat characters, but the fat characters only exist as props to Michael, and therefore they become background set pieces in the show. So part 2, Daryl versus Stanley. The only thing that is kind of nuanced when it comes to race in The Office is how Daryl and Stanley deal with Michael. Stanley is the sassy black man in the show, and he's always just rolling his eyes and doing his crossword puzzles. There are some episodes where he doesn't even get a line. He's just shown rolling his eyes or giving a sassy expression to the camera, and that's it. It's very obvious that Stanley is used as a comic relief character, not only because he's black, but because he's fat, rather than being seen as a full character and given a full arc. Even when Stanley has a heart attack because of Dwight, the episode isn't about Stanley, it's about Michael. Everything is always about Michael. Stanley is able to defend himself and hold his ground against Michael. In the episode Did I Stutter, Stanley does stand up for himself, and actually I think that's like the only really Stanley-centric episode where he gets a lot of lines and a lot of screen time. Even when Michael literally ruins Stanley's marriage because he starts a rumor that Stanley's cheating on his wife, the episode ends with Jim and Pam and their happiness. Stanley is also constantly at the mercy of Michael's racist assumptions about him. For example, Michael always says to Stanley that he thinks that he grew up in the inner city. Stanley tries to educate Michael and tells him that no, he grew up in a small town, but Michael doesn't care to hear it because that will challenge his notions, his preconceived notions of black people. Daryl, on the other hand, leans into the stereotyping of his race that Michael does to him because he knows that Michael doesn't care about learning about the black community, so why waste his time? These are both ways that people of color deal with racism in office settings. Both aren't ideal, but what else can we do when the white person isn't willing to listen? I like The Office because they are trying to be more realistic with how black people face racism in the office, but at the end of the day, they don't really have much commentary or anything to really say about that, except white people are going to be racist, what are you going to do? So number 3, Jim is creepy. I think Jim's obsession with Pam is supposed to be cute and sweet, but it comes off as very creepy and kind of stalkery, considering that she's engaged. And though it's clear that Roy isn't a good guy, Jim kind of inserts himself and tells Pam that he's the right guy. One of the creepiest things he did, in my opinion, was in the Secret Santa episode. Jim gets Pam a teapot and then proceeds to put his yearbook photo in it, and also ketchup packets from like a year ago from a restaurant they went to one time, And I think it's important to mention that they're not even dating at this point, and she's still engaged to Roy. And then, of course, after they start dating, Jim gets an engagement ring for her, the day after they start dating. Also, in season 5 on, I find Jim and Pam really annoying, mainly because they just get more power in the office, and they start to act more like Michael. Jim becomes co-manager, and Pam becomes a salesperson with no experience in sales. This does change later, thank God, but it still makes me wonder, what is her purpose and why is she there? I guess when she makes up a job for herself, it just shows the sad reality that she doesn't really have any skills. And in the finale, she never gets a job and she never becomes the artist that she wanted to be. It's sad and also realistic. Let me know what you think about Pam's arc and character in the comments down below, because I really have no idea how fans feel about her. In the middle of the series, she decides to join Michael Scott Paper Company and goes through this unnecessary midlife crisis. Pam and Jim are the blandest people on the show, but we end up spending all of our time with them. Also, Jim is so ignorant that he actually thinks that everyone in the office would want to celebrate their birthday on a single day. That made me hate him. So number 4, Michael and Dwight. So when I was writing this script, I was looking through my notes and I literally wrote, Dwight is German. Is he a Nazi? And yeah, kinda. He's the kind of white person that fate calls INS so he doesn't have to pay his Latino laborers. So a lot of people see Dwight and Michael as people who are either neurodivergent or mentally ill. And it is kind of alluded to in season 9 that Dwight is dealing with anxiety, but having anxiety doesn't give you an excuse to be a racist. Mentally ill and neurodivergent people aren't terrible people, even though writers kind of equate the two all the time. It's no secret that Dwight is a fascist sympathizer and also a cop. He's also not only racist, but he's sexist. He doesn't believe that women should wear pants, and he doesn't believe that girls should join the Girl Scouts because it teaches them to be financially independent. And I know everyone in the office is supposed to be a bad person and that we're not supposed to be on Dwight's side or see him as good, but I can't help but think of all of the people who unironically stan Dwight. The only reason we even tolerate Dwight is because Michael hates him. And when Michael leaves, they make Dwight even more annoying and also very aggressive. The only time I actually found myself laughing after Michael left was when Nellie and Jim pretended to be a radio station and Dwight called them and they made Dwight think that he was ruining Dunder Mifflin. Michael, like Dwight, is sexist and racist, but he's also ableist, transphobic, and just a terrible boss. However, everyone does feel bad for him, including Oscar, who he called the F word and made him come out to the entire office, and they feel bad for him because they know how pathetic he really is. It's stated very clearly in Season 2, Bring Your Daughters to Work Day, that Michael always wanted to have kids and also a wife, but he never got that. Even as a kid, he wanted to have 100 children so they would be forced to be his friends. And sadly, in real life, a lot of parents do feel that way towards their kids. Anyway, Michael is the boss and he revels in it because he doesn't have any friends or family or life outside of work. So he sees his coworkers and his subordinates as his family, which of course leads to a very toxic work environment. They're his workers and he's their boss. So they can't really speak out against him and his terrible views without their job being in jeopardy. This is seen most clearly when Daryl wants to start a union. So they have to put up with his bullshit and pretend to like him because they do realize that he is very easily manipulated and that he also doesn't really care if they get their work done. Michael also illustrates how fast men can rise through the ranks by just being a guy's guy. And even though we see him as irresponsible, we learn that there's even bigger assholes in the company at the branch manager meeting in Season 2. So by comparison, we see that Michael isn't that bad. We also see that he's a pretty good salesman and can act appropriately when he's not in front of the camera. He also does have some very genuine, heartfelt moments, for example, when he buys Pam's painting at the art show. But those small good deeds he does once in a blue moon doesn't outweigh the terrible and awful things he does on a daily basis. But I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that I didn't bawl my eyes out when he left the show. We're all very lucky that he was played by Steve Carell. So number 5, Angela is the worst character. One of the most dated things about The Office are the gay jokes. There's one episode in Season 2 where Michael uses the F word non-stop and then forces Oscar to come out to the office. There's also this one episode where Oscar is thinking of trying girls because Angela thinks that he can switch over. I am aware that this joke probably isn't meant to be taken seriously, but I couldn't tell if they were serious or not. So I think that honestly falls on the writing. Angela is just outwardly homophobic and slut-shamey for the entire show. And even worse is that she cheats on Andy with Dwight while stringing Andy along for months while also having this holier-than-thou attitude. Most of the characters are terrible in their own ways, but some do make it out unscathed, primarily Oscar. Later on in the show, Oscar and Angela do form this bond over both being duped by the state senator, so that is kind of nice. But it is more Oscar going out of his way to be nice rather than Angela changing her ways. So number 6, and my biggest and longest point, The Office versus The Big Bang Theory. The strangest and most interesting thing to me about The Office is how it seems to have directly influenced The Big Bang Theory, a more classic sitcom with a laugh track and Friends plot base. As someone who has sat through both, let me break down the similarities because they are something. Firstly, Kelly and Raj are eerily similar. They're both hopeless romantics waiting for their true love. And of course, they're also Indian. Secondly, Penny and Pam are basically also the same character. They're the motherly figures and the only ones that can really calm down the man babies in the group. And thirdly, Dwight and Sheldon are basically carbon copies of each other, save for the fact that Sheldon canonically does have a mental illness and everyone hates him for it. But Sheldon seems to have a little bit of not only Dwight, but Michael. Dwight because of his idiosyncratic tendencies, and Michael because they're both man babies. The biggest difference are the style of the two shows. For example, in The Office, thank God, there is no laugh track. If there was a laugh track, it would be complete chaos because we would all be laughing with Michael instead of at him. For example, when Phyllis gets flashed in the parking lot, Dwight blames it on her for the way she's dressed, and Michael thinks it's funny because she's too ugly to get sexually harassed. This is awful, and we all know it's awful, and most of the characters, at least the majority, also know that this is wrong. And then they just stare at Michael in disbelief. So the show gets both audiences on their side, the ones against Michael and the ones with him, doubling their viewership. And this makes it very easy for people to spin the show into very good commentary and good satire on the workplace and men in general, even if the writers are on board and are on the side of Michael. And because there's this ambiguity created due to the lack of laugh track, it's a bearable moment, and we can choose where to laugh. It's really hard to make a show where we're all in on the joke and where we all know it's wrong, but it's still funny because, again, we're all in on it. It's really hard to do that. So I give the writers all of my kudos, but sometimes it does fail. One standout episode is, of course, when they force Oscar to come out to the office and constantly use the F word. But other times they do really succeed, for example, with the Diversity Day episode. But unfortunately, the show ultimately fails because it doesn't give the marginalized characters enough of a voice. Because Michael is the main character and everything is about him and everyone defers to him. Even an episode that's clearly about racism, sexism, or mental illness, Michael ultimately gets the last word. They literally have Daryl in the mental illness episode talk Michael off the ledge. The Big Bang Theory, on the other hand, fails because of its laugh track. First off, none of the jokes are even remotely funny, but they're even less funny without the track, showing, of course, how much the show depends on this laugh track. Secondly, because of the track, we know we're supposed to be laughing at the character's expense, the same characters the show claims to be lifting up. Nerds. We're supposed to laugh at their pain, specifically Sheldon for being a nerd and neurodivergent, but also we're supposed to laugh with him when he's making racist and sexist jokes. The show is all over the place. We're supposed to laugh with the fat jokes, and the laughter doesn't come from the fact that we know that laughing at fat people is wrong. They don't even try to lampshade it. They're just straight up laughing at the fact that Howard's mother is fat. There's a lot of fat shaming in The Office, but they do try to make it as unfunny as possible, I guess. I guess where the humor really comes from is the fact that it's a documentary style, so it's a little bit more high art than a sitcom, so therefore it's automatically imbued with this sort of commentary, even though it could be totally devoid of that commentary. The Office makes it just vague enough that if you do already hate fat people, you'll be laughing at the fat people rather than at Michael making fun of fat people. And though both shows have terrible people as their protagonists, we can stand Michael and Dwight a little bit better than Sheldon because at least Michael hates Dwight. When Michael likes Dwight or when Dwight goes unchecked, that's when there's trouble. Leonard can't hate Sheldon because they're painted as friends, and this goes for the entire cast. The Big Bang Theory cast are seen as friends or they're painted as friends, but they constantly rip on one another and just hate each other, it seems. But in The Office, it's more believable that they dislike each other because they're coworkers and not friends, and who doesn't dislike at least one coworker? Especially when you work with Dwight, who's a cop, and Michael, who is an offensive and ignorant boss. Also, unlike The Big Bang Theory, The Office doesn't have any textual evidence that Michael or Dwight are neurodivergent. The Big Bang Theory goes out of its way to tell us that Sheldon is neurodivergent, but that also means that he has no filter because to the writers, being neurodivergent and having no filter are the same things. We are given hints that because of his upbringing, Michael is the way he is, but at the end of the day, he just has a big personality and is racist and sexist. Like, is it that hard to believe that a man with power is sexist and racist? Like, come on. With Sheldon, they tried to give him this out by having him be neurodivergent so he's able to get a pass. But this falls flat because his friends also just hate him. In the last episode of the series, Sheldon wins a Nobel Prize, but in his speech, he apologizes to his friends for his neurodivergency. Like, neurodivergent people shouldn't have to apologize for the way they are, but Sheldon should apologize for being an unnecessary sexist and racist asshole, which he is almost every day. Dwight is the way he is because of his Amish upbringing that I guess was very conservative, but it never gives him an out to be slut-shamey and racist. If anything, we still see him as a sexist asshole. The same goes with Michael. Even though we're told about his upbringing, it's not to give him an out, but rather to just explain who he is and why he is the way he is, is, but not to make him more sympathetic, at least to the TV audience watching at home. For the characters in the show, they do become more sympathetic the more they learn about Michael's life. So The Big Bang Theory came out in 2007 during the 4th season of The Office, and I do think that they took a lot from The Office and honestly just made it a lot worse. Most people compare The Big Bang Theory to Friends, and that makes sense, but I honestly think The Big Bang Theory took a lot more from The Office, as illustrated with Sheldon's character and the dynamic between the friends in The Big Bang Theory. It's a lot more hostile than in the show Friends. And yeah, in Friends, they rip on each other, but in The Big Bang Theory, it's constant. All the jokes are essentially just jabs at the archetypes each actor is portraying. And essentially, that's what I think the writers from The Big Bang Theory took from The Office. They saw all the characters being mean to each other and being offensive, and they thought, yeah, we can do that. But it's not that easy. It's all in the subtleties. There's so much subtext in The Office, no one actually says what they need or want besides Michael and Dwight, but in The Big Bang Theory, it's the complete opposite. Everyone just states their needs, wants, and desires out loud. And yeah, I get it, it's a sitcom, but it makes The Big Bang Theory that much worse. When Michael tells Dwight to shut it, it's always under his breath. When Pam and Angela fight, it's behind niceties. And that's because The Office is just a more realistic show, which means people need to act according to social conventions. And that, of course, just leads naturally to more subtext and more reading in between the lines. This leads to a lot of hidden jokes and comedy, and of course a great juxtaposition with Michael and Dwight in order to emphasize what's wrong with them. In The Big Bang Theory, everyone just acts ridiculous, and I get it, it's a sitcom, but if they really wanted this sort of mean comedy to work, it would have been better in an office setting. And that's why, despite The Big Bang Theory's 12 seasons, people hate it. It's another divisive comedy that you either love or hate, but if I had to choose, I would pick The Office every time, and it seems I'm not alone in that. And honestly, that might just be because it's easier to twist The Office into something more progressive and palatable, even though a lot of other people don't see it that way. But I think we can make a stronger case for The Office, even if the writer's intent was for us to stand Dwight and sympathize with Michael. I think you can watch it with a different lens. So number 7, how does The Office live on? The Office lives on in another NBC show named Superstore. Superstore details the lives of retail workers between ages 18 and 60 who all come from different backgrounds. It's not a mockumentary, but it's just a regular sitcom that thankfully doesn't have a laugh track. We see people's day-to-day lives and also them dealing with corporate and of course their interpersonal relationships. It's a very funny and interesting show that also tries to touch on very serious issues such as undocumented immigrants, race, and LGBTQ+ issues. Unfortunately, the one disabled character on the show isn't actually portrayed by a disabled actor. The show started in 2015, 2 years after the ending of The Office, and the 6th season will hopefully be out sometime next year. I think it's a great way The Office lives on because Superstore is just a more relatable workplace show for our time. Most young people today aren't really working in an office, they're working at warehouses or in big box stores. It's definitely sad, but that is the reality, and that's what people want to see reflected back at them, so they not only feel represented, but some sort of catharsis at the end of the day. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly suggest that you check it out. So that is it. That is the end of the video, the conclusion. It's over. Thank you so much for coming with me on this very excruciatingly deep dive into The Office. I really had fun making this video and also watching The Office and writing my script and reading all my notes. So if you like this video as much as I did, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, share it with someone, another Office fan, and I'll see you in my next video. And if you're new here, please subscribe and ring the bell so you're notified every time I post a new video. I post every Tuesday and Friday. The next video will be about the differences in the construction of race between Brazil and the United States. So again, if you want to see that video, please subscribe and ring the bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you, of course, to all of my subscribers and patrons. Bye.